Today I'll be speaking about open source. Let's start and get the boring things out of the way. Definitions. What does open source mean? Open source means that the code is public, the modification of the code is unrestricted, distribution is unrestricted as well. But there's some misconceptions of open source, like that it's low quality, that open means free, that it lacks support and scalability. Well, I'm trying to challenge some of those with some cool examples. A disclaimer, I'm going to at certain points ignore the difference between open source and freeware, just so that I can discuss some mods that I think are cool. And now, why gaming? Because it's cool, it's visual, people learn like that, as well as it's a common hobby among the audience, I'd imagine. So cool, let's start discussing the interesting stuff. How do open source teams stay organized? Well, let's start with introducing new developers. Developers are usually found online, as usual, on online discussion forums, subreddits, and so forth. There's a challenge, though, when you're trying to build a team, that organizing across countries becomes difficult because you have to factor in languages and so forth. So how do we bridge the skills development gap in the modding community? Well, there's a lot of free written and video tutorials, active forums, and subreddits with rich documentation and wikis, as well as a lot of the mods have public source code. Here's an example of the creation kit by Bethesda. They were nice enough to release this. It's an example of some documentation. We have project management methodologies within game modification teams. Ownership is decided by whoever has the idea and probably their friends or people they trust. The access control is controlled by them, who can push to which branches. Task tracking in the backlog is created by them, as they essentially are the BAs. And code reviewing is largely done by them or someone who's somewhere along the ownership route. Here's an example of an organization called Wabberjack. Really interesting, allows super powerful stuff that I'll get into just now. So the community creates a lot of tools and libraries. There's quite a few, but one that I think is quite interesting was created by this dude named Boris Vorontsov. Excuse me for messing up his name. But it basically is a graphics engine that you can inject into any game and add subsurface scattering, anything that you want, ambient occlusion, things that weren't implemented in the game itself. Now, noobs. How do we protect noobs and also allow them to enjoy the beautiful creations that we make? Well, like I said, Wabberjack exists. We can now install entire mod lists with a single click and without repackaging or redistributing any of the mods. And also, we have simple configuration, which can be accessed within the game using mod menus. Let me just show you how this looks. So this is Wabberjack. Here's a mod, for example. People are really nerdy out there, and this person has 394 gigabyte size mod with about 2,200 mods within it. Here's the actual mod list. So there's 2,490 mods, all ordered so that conflicts are sorted out, as well as he dug into the code to ensure that there are no game-breaking conflicts and yeah, just a lot of optimizations happen in the background. Here's an example of a mod configuration menu that I mentioned, allows users to access the mods within the game. Now let's start talking about cool things like specific games. My favorite gaming studio is Bethesda Studios, well, Softworks. They've had a huge influence on the modding culture as well as the industry as a whole. The corporate influence that they've had, some of it's positive, some of it's negative. They've developed mods like the creation kit, as well as negative things like the creation club, which is just paid mods, but they try to lie and say it's not. Now let's discuss some games. The Elder Scrolls franchise. First, let's give a brief overview of it. There's Morrowind, there's Oblivion, and there's Skyrim. 3 games, 3 dope games. But one thing that you can notice over here is each subsequent game gets streamlined. Features get dropped like hand-to-hand combat, got dropped, it got moved, things get dropped, the game becomes less complex over time. Some of us like these complexities and we'd like to keep them in the game. So that's where modding comes in. It allows you to add anything you want to the game. Let's start with Skyrim. Just to give you an idea of the scale of the modding community and the modding scene around Skyrim, Skyrim was released on the 11th of the 11th of the 11th in 2012, November the 11th. There are 69.5 thousand mods released. That I'll prove just now. There are 2.6 billion mods downloaded by for Skyrim, and about 2,424, which is more symmetry, mod packs and collections created. Let me just give you some proof of those values. Here we can see 69,000 and 2.6 billion. There's some weird nuance because Bethesda likes to keep on releasing the same game, but those are essentially the same numbers. Here's GTA's mod scene, so you can just see it's not just limited to that. There's millions of mods being downloaded every day. Cool. Now we have different categories of mods that you can create. The most common kind are bug fixes. This is when studios release games in an unfinished state, and also some quality of life fixes that we like to add. Here's the most popular mods for Skyrim listed in order. The most popular is textures, because Skyrim is super old and our computers aren't slow anymore. And the second is patching. There's a lot of bugs within Bethesda games, but fortunately they gave us the ability to do their job. We have UI mods. These can be redesigning the user experience to make quality of life fixes once again, as well as the mod configuration menus that I mentioned earlier. An example of a mod that fixes the menu would be this. This is the original menu. It's really bad. You can only see one thing at a time, or all of the things, barely get any information from them. Here's the updated menu. You can sort by type, class, armor, weight, value. It shows what type of thing it is with a little sign, as well as some other things that I don't understand, and your categories over there. You can even do searching based on certain names, which isn't a feature that was included in the game initially. Here's the mod lists where, like I mentioned, you can just input your mod and then the users can edit the settings without having to know how to use a computer. Cool, next, the most interesting ones, gameplay. With mods, they allow us to change the combat, affect the economy within games, change the NPC AI, as well as add completely new mechanics like multiplayer to a game that doesn't have it. Like Skyrim Play Together. These are all people individually playing on a server on a game released in 2011 that has no online. Here's another example of changing the mechanics completely. Skyrim works in a cell-based system, so when you walk in a door, you have a loading screen and you only load one thing at a time. Here's a mod which opens the cells. Here is a barrier between the cell of the city and the cell of the outside. The city is being rendered in real time here due to mods. Story mods. We can create our own stories, as well as something interesting that's recently been released, AI integrated voice acting. So you can create your own quests that are voiced, but then there's a question of whether this is ethical or not, given that voice acting is a career. Here's an example of the mod that does the voice acting. It was released recently this year in February. And here is an example of a custom companion that someone added in with some custom fun dialogue over there. Now, the most fun part is the ENBs. Like I mentioned, Boris created this wonderful thing, and you can just share your different configs. It has the whole settings of your beautiful game on it, as well as graphics overhauls, which allow us to do very cool things. Here's how Skyrim initially looked. Not the best looking game, not ugly by a long stretch, but you can turn it into this. Sorry, had to wait for the thing to render. All the trees are added by mods, custom textures for the roads. So much is going on. Here's another example of a before and after. Let's just wait until the thing loads. Barely any ambient occlusion, barely any shadows from skylighting. Then we have this. Skylighting, shadows, ambient occlusion, the works. We even have some bloom effects. Here's a good example of how games used to be, just gray, nighttime really isn't dark. And then here, things get really warm. a game from 2012 brought into the future. Here's an example of a dragon doing some cool stuff. Cool. Now we're done with Fallout, with Skyrim, sorry. Let's discuss Fallout briefly. Fallout is basically Skyrim with guns. We have mods, mod community in Fallout. Here's a trans thing. I'm not sure what this mod is. It's a plushie. And then GTA, Modern Warfare guns and some other things. Just quickly to rush over the relevant games within the Fallout series, Fallout 3, Fallout New Vegas, and Fallout 4 were all made by Bethesda Softworks and released by them. Here's an example of the games. You can kind of see how the graphics improves over time. Now you can do really cool things with mods like lore expansions. I mentioned the games and the previous ones for a reason. Let's start with Skyrim. Skyrim has 3 cool, very, very big, ambitious mods. Skywind, Beyond Skyrim Bruma, which is just the first chapter of it, and Skyblivion. Yeah, here's the Skyrim map, just so to put all of that into context. The games in Skyrim were released in this order. Morrowind is the purple stuff, that was the map you got. Oblivion is the yellow things, that was the map you got, and Skyrim is the silver stuff, that was the map you got. Beyond Skyrim Bruma adds Bruma into the Skyrim game. And like I said, it's the first chapter. The plan is to add the whole continent, or for the lack of a better word, is the country. And then Skywind similarly adds Morrowind into the new engine. And what's the other one? Skyblivion adds Oblivion, the entire Cyrodiil. Anyway, just moving forward. Now we have similar things to expand the actual lore within the game in the Fallout series. This is a picture of Oblivion in Skyrim's engine. So we have Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas. There's a mod called Sim Settlements 2, which allows us to play one and then play the other seamlessly without exiting a screen or the menu. As soon as you complete the first game, the next game starts with some stuff in between to make it seamless. And also a game mode called Sim Settlements, which brings in Sims into Fallout. Cool, I think I'm getting ahead of myself here. We have total conversion mods as well. This brings me to the last part of my talk. We have Lord of the Rings. We all love Lord of the Rings in the room. We have another Lord of the Rings mod and a mod called Enderroll. The Lord of the Rings mod, like one of them, adds Lord of the Rings into the game. This shouldn't be there. Enderroll is just someone's idea of a story, and they've implemented it within Skyrim's engine. Cool. Then we have cool things like Fallout Miami and Fallout London, which allow us to add Fallout, but set in London, and Fallout set in Miami, with cool graphics and everything, custom modes. Cool. Just want to briefly discuss examples from other studios like Grand Theft Auto. Grand Theft Auto has a really cool mod, which is basically just a Los Angeles simulator. And it really opens up a profit opportunity, which goes against my previous misconception with open source that it's always free, called 5Real. 5Real is basically, to just skim over all of these words, if someone puts a billboard up in LA, it's in the game. If they change it next week, it's in the game. And all the architecture is there, like the Ritz-Carlton, the crypto arena, and so forth. And it's all easy to use. You just click and you install. Obviously, you have to own GTA first, and obviously pay them a little bit of a subscription to keep on getting the updates. But that's literally all you need. And you have this. You have the Staples Center in GTA. This is GTA over here. Redesigned graphics. Remember, this is a game from 2013. And this is the real life Staples Center, almost indistinguishable. Another example would be just the LA skyline, but that's not included here. And the, I don't know what place this is in GTA, but it's clearly real life also. Yeah. And then another aspect of mods is fixing broken games like Cyberpunk 2077. A game we were also excited to play, but ended up being game breaking. There was a mod generated called Cyber Engine Tweaks, which was downloaded quite many times, I think 4 million. And it brings your game from having 65 FPS to 81 FPS in certain places with the top of the line machinery. Now, just to briefly, my final example will be a game which is basically made off of the concept of total conversion mods, which is Mount and Blade. There's Star Wars mods, there's Viking mods, there's historically accurate Europe mods, as well as Game of Thrones mods, anything that you can think of. This is a sword fighting game essentially where you can take over a kingdom, and it adds stormtroopers into it and lights Star Wars. Here's the Vikings added into the game, and here is the historically accurate Europe simulator. We can see our people from Lisbon office are over here, our Barcelona is over there, Madrid is over there, all historically accurate within the game, so you can take over Barcelona and be the king if you so please. That's it for me.